This episode of Tales from the Backlog is brought to you by the wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/realdavejackson. Some personal heroes of mine like Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast Crew, Zulgeek, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Vicori, Jill, Soccer, ZNA, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Rob Shack, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jake Martin, Jenny E., and a new patron, Dave C. And many more have all gone to patreon.com/realdavejackson to throw a few bucks a month and help support the show. In return for their donations, these wonderful people are getting some bonus treats like voting in polls for games to appear on the show. Bonus episodes, like this month we had a bonus episode about the game Detention. And on my bonus retro gaming podcast this month, called Tales from the Way Backlog, we had Zombies Ate My Neighbors. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can head to patreon.com/realdavejackson. Any and all support is always appreciated. And with that being said, let's get to Dead Space. Hello everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today to discuss Dead Space is a friend of the show, a Twitch streamer under the moniker Vertigo2Hell, and he's here to make us whole again. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey everybody.
Good to have you on the show, man. I've watched you stream several times. We've been chatting in various Discords and Slack servers for a long time now, so good to finally have you on the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about Dead Space, like I said, which is a sci-fi horror third-person shooter developed by Motive Studio and published by EA in 2023 for PC, PS5, and the Xbox Series consoles. We are going to talk about the remake today. That's the only one that I've played. The original game is from 2008, and that one was developed and published by EA. So again, talking about the remake, though I know, Chris, you've played the original, so we will probably reference some of that a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The spoiler policy for this episode, if someone's listening and has not played Dead Space, this is how the show works every episode pretty much. We are not going to spoil the story before the spoiler break, so we'll talk kind of briefly about the story, but we'll avoid spoiling what happens before the spoiler break. So you can find the timestamp for when the spoilers begin down in the show notes. So we've prepared some elevator pitches for everybody who doesn't know what Dead Space is. I say this is sci-fi horror with one of video gaming's best weapons aboard one of video gaming's best spaceships. Chris, what would you say?
I would say for me, it was kind of like Aliens meets Event Horizon. With a hell of a lot more stomping.
That sounds good to me, yeah. Some quick stats here for how long the game is. I played this on PS5 and it took me 13 hours. I did not do a ton of side questing, so I think that you could kind of extend this out a little bit longer if you go backtracking for side quests. How about you?
Oh yeah, same. I did like one or two towards the beginning and then kind of had to get on track with the main quest there. But yeah, I could see a lot more time being put into it, like going back for a replay.
Yeah, for sure. You played this on PC?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll start out by getting into our histories with the Dead Space series and this remake in particular. And Chris, we'll start with you. You have played the original, so when did you play that, and what made you want to play the remake?
All right, so it was kind of around when it first came out. Not exactly, but I'd say within probably the same year it first came out. I really enjoyed it. It was really kind of cool getting to play a game like that kind of like in my elevator pitch, that was like Aliens meets Event Horizon, being on like a really cool spaceship, being a cool space dude. I actually never played the sequels.
Okay.
Which might shock people, because I think people generally like 2 the most of the series, but yeah, I just know the first one.
Okay.
And that yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. And was it me inviting you to come on the show that made you want to play the remake, or was it already on your radar because you liked the first one?
Yeah, it was generally on my radar. I remember people were actually, before it came out, were so hyped up for Callisto Protocol.
Yeah.
Like, they thought, oh, this is going to be the new Dead Space. And then it came out and everybody was disappointed. And nobody believed that EA was going to come out with this remake that was actually going to be better. Yeah. When it first came out, I watched a couple of like little short bits of streams, and I'm like, oh yeah, this looks pretty good. And yeah, I had to go back, and it was worth it. It took me a while to go back.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally worth it.
Yeah, for sure. For me personally, I never played the original. I had an Xbox 360 back in 2008. I played a ton of video games. I'm not sure that I'm sure I heard of Dead Space. Like, I don't think it was that off my radar, but I certainly never even considered playing it back then, even though it got really good reviews and stuff. I think 2008, I was probably mostly still playing Oblivion and Fallout 3 and games like that. So
oh yeah.
This was, I was too busy spending hundreds of hours in those games to really consider playing other stuff, I think. So I'm also a very, very recent, I mean, in the last couple of months, official fan of horror games. So Dead Space is one of those games that a lot of people say is super, super scary. And therefore it was totally not part of my plans for video games at all. Until I eventually found myself enjoying horror games more and more as time goes on. And this was actually the winner of the October Patreon poll for games to come on the show. The patrons, I think the 2 finalists were Detention and Dead Space. And so the patrons chose, actually it was a tie, I remember, because we did another Smash Brothers tiebreaker. And Dead Space came out victorious. So that's why it's on the show, because it was the winner of a Patreon poll. But me kind of coming to terms with the fact that I actually do like horror games put it more on my like, okay, I should probably play Dead Space. This is like a super famous horror game, right?
That's right. One of us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. For people who don't know, Chris usually streams horror games on Twitch. So you did stream this game a little bit, right?
Yeah. I'd say I probably got to the good like halfway point, and then I'm like, oh wait, the date is coming up. I really gotta sit down and probably do the rest of this off stream.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And to get into some quick opening thoughts about this remake here, I thought that this game's pretty good. The one big surprise, which I will get into, later in the episode, was that I did not think this game was very scary, which is a big shock to me. I'll get into that, but it is a tense game. And I think that there's a lot of very, very cool gameplay design, visual design, and sound design to go along with all of that stuff. I know this game has a story that a lot of people think is interesting and surprising. I spoiled myself on the story a long time ago because I was convinced I would never play this game. So shout out to Play Along Podcast, friends of the show, for a fun episode that I listened to and completely spoiled the story for myself. How about you? What did you think of this remake real quick?
So I can definitely see where you're coming from with your opinion there. So for me, I'd say it was generally probably a bit more scary, but like I have a thing where jump scares in video games really get me.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I got my headphones on and you got the loud noise. It's kind of like seeing a horror movie in theaters where it's just loud and it gets you.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the story, I mean, I guess I could take or leave it really. Like it's a sci-fi space horror story. There's necromorphs running around, little raw chickens jumping on you. Like it's fine for what it is. I'm sure EA has made worse games.
I'm sure they have, yeah. Such as Dead Space 3, right?
Right, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
But yeah. Like in general, I think it's solid for what it is. It's a dumb B horror sci-fi story.
Mm-hmm.
And it has fun with its jump scares. It does get a little old to me after a while.
Yeah, 13 hours is fairly long for this kind of like super intense, no breaks horror game, I think.
Right. And like my favorite, like I do a lot of indie horror games, and like I don't know, 3 to 8 hours is kind of like the good spot.
Yeah.
And you got 13 hours here, and ooh. But yeah, overall, pretty good. I say pretty good.
All right. The other thing I guess I'll just mention right at the top is that this is not super fair to Dead Space if you want to view it in a vacuum, but nobody plays video games or consumes media in a vacuum. And I played Resident Evil 4 Remake a couple months ago, and
Yes.
Dead Space is super, super inspired by Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 4 eats its lunch, in my opinion. It is just not as good if you play them in close proximity. So while I was playing Dead Space, I did have this nagging thing of like, man, RE4 was really fucking good, wasn't it? And so it was just kind of on my mind. And I may bring it up when we talk about gameplay a little bit later, but I want to kind of get that out there that I am on Team RE4 if we're picking sides.
Absolutely 1000% the same.
Okay. All right. Not to belabor that point, kind of dunking on Dead Space at the beginning. We both said it's a pretty good game. Let's take a little break, come back, and introduce the story for Dead Space. So, in Dead Space, you play as Isaac Clarke, who is a crewman on a repair vessel called the USG Kellyan, who is sent to a planetary excavator ship called the USG Ishimura. This is the kind of advanced technology sci-fi to the point where we have these ships that basically break entire planets apart to mine them for resources. So, big advancements in space technology here. The USG Ishimura has gone silent, and so the Kellyan is sent to investigate. Isaac, though, is particularly interested in what's going on the Ishimura because his girlfriend, Nicole Brennan, works on the Ishimura, and he received a distress call from her about bad shit happening without getting into spoilers here. This is all, you learn all of this in the first 5 minutes of the game, what I just said right there. So a couple things about this like setting or story setup, I think. I want to shout out the Ishimura for being really fucking cool. It was in my elevator pitch. There is something to me about, maybe it's the limitations of our own technology, the real world that we live in, but a giant, like unfathomably big spaceship like this, or like a Star Destroyer in Star Wars or something like that. Always cool. It's like automatically give me a big fucking spaceship. It's cool. The cool thing about this, though, is you go to lots of spaces inside the ship where you see how big this thing really is. And you're in one small section of the ship, but it's this cavernous room that you're in. And so it really gives you like a crazy sense of scale for where this game, the entire game takes place basically in the Ishimura.
Oh, yeah. It is a really, really cool ship. And I think something about it that, like, I go back again to the movie Event Horizon, which this ship reminds me a lot of, is that it's very industrial looking.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool and goes perfect for being, like a, I don't know, blue collar planet cracker ship.
Yeah.
Like, of course it's going to be industrial looking, and, Event Horizon had that kind of like industrial look to it. Very, very cool. Ship is gigantic. I love it. I don't get very many awesome ships like I don't know, what am I thinking of? Like the Normandy from Mass Effect.
Yeah.
I remember it was always a lot of fun to just kind of like, because that was kind of like a hub in between missions. And yeah, this one, especially with like the side quests in it, being able to backtrack and you do some backtracking in the game main quest anyways. Just really cool.
Yeah. The fact that it is so big, like, the Normandy can fit like 20 people on board. The Ishimura is like, it's like its own city basically. So you compare it more to the Citadel from Mass Effect. So the fact that it is that big, and you go from all of the classic space station locations, you go through crew quarters and kitchens and like work areas and all kinds of places like that. So you really get a good feel. Yeah, the morgue. Let us not forget that. Hospitals and operating rooms and all of those things. So you really get a sense for like how complete of an environment this ship is. Kind of like what's it called? Talos 1 in Prey. I might be mixing up my spaceships.
The space station.
Yeah, similar scale to that, where you see every facet of everyone's life on the ship. You go to all those places. One notable thing to point out about the remake, and I'm interested to get your opinion about this here, Chris, is that Isaac is voiced in the remake. Isaac was a silent protagonist in the original. Isaac does not have a noteworthy voice, I would say. He sounds like a regular guy, which I think plays into his characterization. He's supposed to be a regular guy. But since you played the original where he was a silent protagonist, do you prefer him with the voice, or did you prefer him just being quiet?
I didn't mind his voice in this one. Like you said, he's very everyman. But I guess going back to Resident Evil again, he's not the everyman that I liked from like Ethan Winters from 7 and 8, especially 7. He is kind of, I don't know, forgettable, but I don't know, just playing modern games, like, I didn't mind it. It was nice when I was streaming it, where I didn't have to read all of his dialogue out loud. But yeah, he had some fine lines every now and then. I'd say I approve.
Yeah, it's kind of Isaac's thing. Like his whole thing, he's an engineer, a crewman. He's not like, compare this to Shepard from Mass Effect or any number of action games, shooters. He's not a buffed up military dude protagonist. He's just a guy. This plays into the weapons that you use. Your weapons are mostly like engineering tools and stuff like that, like plasma cutter and a flamethrower, stuff that an engineer would probably know how to use, fixing up spaceships. So it all plays into his characterization. His voice actor, I think, did fine for what they wanted. I don't think they wanted you to come out of this with like thinking that Isaac is this insanely charismatic character, because I don't think he's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I agree with that 100%.
So what's going on the ship? Once you get inside, there are a few minutes of calm as you walk in. There's a really great opening where you exit the ship that you came in on. You're starting to walk down this, I want to say boardwalk, because I don't have a better word for it in sci-fi terms, but you're walking through this like entrance hall, and there's the big lit up sign that says USG Ishimura. And then all hell breaks loose. There's aliens on the ship. The crew have been turned into these monsters called necromorphs. They attack your crew on the Kellion, and everyone either gets killed or separated. So this is a very solitary game. Isaac is by himself, and you're trying to press on in the ship to find out what happened and look for Nicole. Try and save Nicole. So that is where I'm going to leave off on the story here, because I don't want to get any further with why there are aliens on the ship or what's going on with Nicole. But that is basically the bulk of what the narrative of this game is. So did you enjoy, without spoiling what's going on, did you enjoy finding out what's going on with the crewmates and what's going on with Nicole and all of that?
Yeah, I generally had a lot of fun with it. Again, it is a very B horror movie, but I am certainly down for that kind of horror story. Aside from some of the gameplay loops being kind of samey, it was still worth getting like the story stuff that happened. It was kind of like a nice break from the action, more or less. And I'd say in general, just because it has been so long since I played the original, a lot of the story stuff was actually kind of fresh to me. Like I didn't remember a lot of the beats because it had been so many years. So yeah, absolutely, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that without spoiling, I think that the explanation for what's going on with the crew and why the aliens are there, I thought that was pretty fun. I enjoyed that storyline. There are other things going on the ship that I thought, or in the story that I thought were a little bit weirder and like a little bit harder to suspend my disbelief. We'll talk about those in the spoiler section. It's worth pointing out though that, like you said, you have long chunks of gameplay and then short bits of conversation, like you're talking to your crewmates on the radio or something else is happening. But a lot of that conversation is literally just like classic space station, everything's breaking conversations where it's like, Isaac, the gravity field is fucked up. Can you go fix the gravity field? And Isaac's like, yeah, I can go fix the gravity field. And then that's what that conversation is. So I think that a lot of the like storytelling, like direct storytelling, is pretty backloaded unless you're reading a lot of the notes that are around the ship and the audio logs and stuff like that, which build up flavor about like what happened, but not like Isaac's story on the ship, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I did really enjoy getting like a lot of the audio logs and stuff, but yeah, it is more like context of like, oh, I don't know, this doctor is crazy. Here's more examples of why he's crazy. You know, nothing to do with Isaac at all, but you know, it's still a fun way to break up the the constant shooting.
Yeah, Isaac is all work. He's really focused on what's going on with the mission to basically keep the ship from exploding or breaking apart or getting hit by asteroids or any number of bad things that can happen to a ship. So his story is really backloaded, like I said. But along the way, you're learning about this religious cult that's on board. You're learning about what went on with the crewmates, both before and after shit hit the fan on the Ishimura. I enjoyed that backstory a lot. And they do the cool thing where audio logs let you move around when you listen to them. So you can listen to an audio log and go scrounge for supplies while you're listening. You don't have to stand in place. I'm glad that that's kind of going the way of the buffalo.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I will admit this though. I am too old school of a gamer guy, that when I do get an audio log, I still tend to sit there. Because I always fear that, like, oh, if I move too far, cutscene is going to happen and I'm going to miss, whatever dialogue. I'm just too old school on that.
That's true. I did tend to like at least stay in the room that I was in when an audio log's playing, because I don't want to go through a door
Absolutely.
and then have something attack me because I won't be able to listen in that case.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And then a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the backstory of what's going on with the crew and the aliens and the source of all of this madness, I thought that was pretty fun. It's not a life-changing story. And again, there's one really big thing that would maybe surprise people. I'll ask you in the spoiler section that I spoiled myself on, so I can't really comment on whether that was well delivered, but I do think that it's pretty well foreshadowed, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like people should pick up on it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Kind of famous thing with this game. So, the other part of like the storytelling and, world building and stuff in here is the way that the game looks and sounds. I want to shout out the remake for being a really, really good looking game. The way that it's photorealistic. So Isaac's suit looks really nice in the way that like light reflects off of the metal pieces of his suit. His suit looks really cool too. Especially when you get some of those upgrades and it starts looking more and more like workman. I don't know. Industrial. That's the word I guess I'll use. It doesn't look like a spacesuit. It's definitely not like a space military suit like some other games that you might control somebody in space. It looks like he's going to work, and you get more and more protection in the form of like metal bars going across the suit as you go on throughout the game. So this is a really good looking game. I also want to shout out the lighting. Of course, it's a horror game, should have good lighting, and really, really well done here in Dead Space.
Yeah. I agree. The suit looks really cool. Love the upgrades for it. I know me personally, I could have used even more protection from it.
Yeah.
Because I am bad at action games. But yeah, the visuals are just so good. Like, I swear, didn't it even have like a thing where like you'd get like if you got like attacked, like you'd get like the blood and gore like on the suit too.
Yeah, you'd be covered in blood at the end of those fights. Yeah.
Yeah, it's visually it's pretty chef's kiss.
Yeah. Speaking of visual chef kisses, this is a really famous thing about Dead Space, the way that it has this minimalist UI and HUD look to it, where when you're playing, there are no HUD elements at all. Isaac's health bar is a little tube of weird green liquid on the back of his suit or something. I don't know what's in there. Probably shouldn't drink it, whatever it is. But that will display his health. And then you have another type of ammo, like these stasis charges. There's a bar on the back of his suit for that. And if you want a waypoint for where to go, if you click on the right thumbstick, it will give you a line to follow on the ground, not a dot out in the distance that's always there. So this is really, really well done. I feel like this and like the jump scares, I guess, are probably the two most famous things about Dead Space. So I don't feel like I need to spend a lot of time introducing it to people, but it is excellent. It's really good.
Oh yeah, that waypoint line thing, I used that. I was pretty much spamming it the entire game.
Yeah, me too.
And like, what was also really cool about it is that the very few side quests that I actually managed to do, like when you go into the menu and you change the tracking for it, you could use the line on the side quests, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the like as far as the no HUD thing, I think is really, really cool. It's really good looking, really cleans up the screen. But for me, not having like a health HUD thing,
mm-hmm.
I did not pay a lot of attention to the back of the suit. Okay. And I would often find myself finally paying attention to it with, I don't know, probably like 1 health point before death. And like, yeah, I'm just bad at noticing that, I guess. But at least visually, it's very, very nice, very clean.
It is small, so like,
yeah,
you want to give them points for being clean, and making this like clean interface or no interface to look at. You're just looking at your character, but it is pretty small. And like I played this on a big TV. It still took some time for me to get used to. After a while, I did get used to it. You're always looking generally near that anyway. You know, you're looking where your aiming reticule is, not like directly at Isaac's back, but it's not that far away to just, quick flick your eyes over, check and see. But you are right. Like I would often get hit a bunch of times, and because the health bar is not where it is in literally every other video game, I would be like, oh, got hit. I wonder how much health I have. I look, I'm about to die. Okay. So that did happen often. Yeah. The ammo is displayed on like a little holograph screen that comes off of your gun itself. That, again, it's cool to not have that as part of like the UI down in the corner of the screen somewhere, but it is pretty small. And during like hectic fights, it was kind of hard to keep track of. Even if I'm looking right at my gun, it was still kind of hard to see how much ammo I had left.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And me being kind of bad at action games in general, I just had very little ammo for anything throughout most of the game. But yeah, it's very small. Like I like the idea. It would be cool to see like how something like that could be like better improved. I have no idea if Dead Space 2 or 3 did better versions of that, or
yeah, I would assume that like if Dead Space 2 and 3 did better versions, that they would then carry that forward into a remake.
Yeah.
But I'm here where I'm like, I think the idea of this and the execution of it is really good. It's awesome. I still had issues seeing that information because I'm just not used to it. And the ammo thing, I think, is really small. The stasis bar is really small also.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's one of those things where the health, I got used to that. But the other stuff, it was like, this is very cool in idea, but in execution, it's merely like pretty good.
Yeah. Pretty good, but yeah, I'm happy they tried it at least. Like it is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something to commend them for taking all of that stuff away that distracts your eyes from the action. So kind of on that note, this is a horror game. We talked about in the beginning of the episode how we felt about how scary it was, but you mentioned the jump scares. There are lots and lots of jump scares in this game. So those kind of got you said. But other than that, did you find this to be a creepy place to explore? Were you always on your toes, basically?
Generally I say I was. Sometimes you would get to a big room, for example, and oh, right, as soon as I walk in here, a quarantine is going to happen and 30,000 necromorphs are going to be popping through. But it would do some nice little jump scares occasionally for me, especially when I would backtrack. And sometimes I would end up like opening a door, and I would get into a situation that reminds me a lot of the original Doom, where you would open the door and there would just be like the monster right there, ready to kill you. Generally, I'd say it kind of worked throughout, while also getting a little, old after a while, but occasionally something neat would pop up and, jump scare me pretty good.
Yeah. It does. This particular thing, like the amount of jump scares and the way that encounters are set up, does get old, I think. Because, number one, there are, off the top of my head, there's like maybe 4 or 5 types of enemies that you'll fight on a regular basis for 13 hours. That's excluding like special bosses. There is like a kind of Terminator type enemy that gets introduced partway through the game, but it's another necromorph. It's just bigger and it regenerates. That's about it. So you're right. Like when you go into those rooms and you're like, oh, I got to take a battery and put it in the battery slot. When I pick up the battery, stuff's going to pop out of the walls. You start to see the puppet strings well before the game is over. So I do think there's a point, like, I don't know, like if it's a 13-hour game, by like hour 8, I was like, they don't have anything new to throw at me. I know exactly how this is going to go. And there's a particularly like the last couple chapters of the game are really, really samey. You can predict exactly how all the combat's going to go because they don't have anything new to show you by that point in the game. So I'm with you. It definitely did kind of like, I was still kind of like, okay, I want to see the conclusion of the story. So I don't want to say the game like totally wore out its welcome, but there were a couple times when I was like, man, I can't believe there's more of them.
Yeah. It's we brought up a Resident Evil 4 remake earlier, and I hate to do it again, but I'm going to. I don't know how that one is able to do the loop so well throughout the whole game. And this one, Dead Space, does get a little tired. I don't know if it's Dead Space just being kind of like just samey locations, being on like one spaceship generally, or what, but yeah, it's more variety definitely might have helped it.
I was thinking about this, and I think I was talking about this with Adam Bucheri, one of our mutual friends around the Discord servers. And we were talking about how in Resident Evil 4, the Ganados have so much variety to them. Even early in the game, you'll meet several different types. They kind of act unpredictably. Whereas the Necromorphs, as far as like, they look really cool and scary and disgusting, but they all just run straight at you. There's no real strategy to fighting them. So I think that contributes to, like, we're here in talking about, like, was this game scary? This is why this game wasn't that scary to me, because I'm going through a hallway, I see a big vent, and I'm like, well, something's going to pop out of that. Something's popped out of, like, 10 of the last 15 vents I passed. So I really get used to how they introduce those and how they're supposed to jump out and be scary. And then once they're there, I get swarmed by them and I get killed, but it's not because like they're doing something I didn't predict. It's just because there's 10 of them, and sometimes it's too much. So I think that really plays into why this game starts to feel like it's too long at some point. And by the end of it, I was not the least bit afraid of what might be coming, because I already was like, they're not going to introduce a new enemy in hour 13. They would have introduced it already.
Yeah, exactly. I will say this though, something that I weirdly discovered. So when I end up getting swarmed by enemies in like horror games or action games or whatever, I end up doing a thing where I try to loop them around the big room, so I can get my bearings, maybe, turn around really quick, get a couple of good shots off. Generally in games, they kind of just stick behind you, but I did notice something in this where if you have more than one necromorph, they won't just always chase behind you. They'll actually move differently. Which I thought was pretty interesting. Like they'll be like, oh well, this guy's gonna like move up the middle of the room all of a sudden, or this little tentacle guy is just not going to really move at all, and then you'll just run right into him, looping
Fuck
back
those
around.
Little tentacle guys. God damn, those are so annoying.
Yeah, the little tentacle guys and the little raw chickens, I hated so much.
So we talked a little bit about the necromorphs. They look really scary. They look really gross. I like the design of them. The thing that I think I want to give this game credit for, because like the jump scares and stuff, I can't think of a single one that really got me in a satisfying way. It's just kind of like, a loud noise, and then I'm kind of like startled for a second. But, if someone walks in my room and smacks my desk when I'm not looking, I'll get scared by that too. It doesn't mean it's a good scare. So the thing that I want to give this game credit for is I think that the sound design is really creepy. So the tension that I felt when I'm walking through the space station, I want to attribute partly to the lack of ammo, which we'll talk about in a bit. There's a little bit of tension knowing like, oh, I don't have much ammo left. If a bunch of stuff pops out, it's going to be a whole thing. But I think a lot of it goes into the sound design as you're wandering through the ship, and hearing everything that you hear. It is really, really well done. I think this is the best part of its like horror vibes, the sound.
Oh yeah, definitely. I really dug the sound in this, between the monster sounds, the weird whispers you'd hear throughout, the classic horror kind of like soundtrack with the violin strings and the their own kind of like jump chord kind of things that would happen eventually. You'd walk into one of those big rooms. Yeah, you'd get the usual, oh, the room is quarantined, there's anomalies about. But then you get like the cool music, which I dig. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, the combat music, like it's not melodious music. I think that's a word, melodious. It's not catchy, hooky music, but it's like intense pounding stuff in the background. Which is cool, horror game, intense combat, which we'll talk about in a bit, but the combat does get intense. The music reflects that for sure. I'm glad you mentioned the whispers that you hear. The other thing that you hear, because it's often a very quiet game until it's not quiet suddenly, right? But when it is quiet, you're just walking around and you hear like the groan of metal as you're walking through, and like the ship's kind of in a bad shape, so you might hear things break, like you hear like sparking wires and stuff like that. It's all really good, like environmental sound.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they really nailed it with this one. Really gives it that just classic B horror movie vibe. While it might not be as scary, or the scariness wears out its welcome 13 hours in. The music, I love it. The whispers, all of that stuff. I think the whispers also help remind me of my comparison to the movie Event Horizon.
Yeah.
And it gives it that haunted spaceship feel, even though it's not technically haunted.
The movie Event Horizon came across my mind like real early in the game. And I never watched that movie because I don't like horror movies that much. But I did read the Wikipedia page several times because I think the idea of that movie is really fucking cool. And so like this game did remind me of what I had read there. I'm probably never going to watch the movie because from what I read, it's intensely brutal and fucked up. But
yep.
But yeah, it did remind me of that. So the gameplay in Dead Space is a third-person shooter, over-the-shoulder camera. It's that Resident Evil 4, The Last of Us third-person cinematic action game camera that we have now. I guess this was one of the early adopters of it back in the day, though. So the gameplay, your third-person shooting, it's most famous for this dismemberment system. The cool thing about the combat here is that even though it's a third-person shooter, just shooting the enemies a whole bunch of times is rarely the best way to deal with them because it will use more ammo. And ammo is scarce in this game. So using the dismemberment system is the way to go about it. So you will shoot enemies usually with the necromorphs because, again, like 80% of the things you're going to fight are the regular necromorphs. We didn't really talk about what they look like. They're humanoid because they used to be the crew members. But their limbs are really long, kind of spidery, really thin and gangly. And this is perfect for the main loop of the game, which is to shoot the limbs off using your main weapon, which is called the plasma cutter. So you line up the plasma cutter with their limbs as they kind of run toward you or crawl toward you, depending on what's going on. You can press your Alt Fire button to alternate between horizontal and vertical for the plasma cutter. And then you pop, shoot the limbs off. If you shoot off their legs, they fall down. If you shoot off their arms, they can't, swing their stabby appendages at you anymore. And that is the way to go about it. So how did you feel about this main kind of first part of the combat here, which is as they write in blood on the walls, cut off their limbs?
Let me talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Whoever scrawled cut off their limbs in their own blood on the wall, that is just absolutely ridiculous. I love it.
Call me crazy, but like if I'm ever bleeding that much, I don't think I'm going to have the wherewithal to write out a full sentence on the wall in my own blood.
Exactly. I can barely function with a basic cold, let alone bleeding out. But
I can barely function with all the blood in my body.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I guess I'm of two worlds on this combat. If I think about it too much, it's kind of ridiculous and very video gamey.
Oh yeah.
But it is very satisfying, especially taking out the legs of like the bigger main necromorphs, getting them down on the ground crawling to where they're a lot more manageable, especially in a room filled with, I don't know, like 5 of those guys, 3 tentacle guys, and, one of those like poisony guys. I'd say it is a pretty satisfying loop in general. Not quite as good as like Resident Evil 4's combat loop for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, who can compare really to that perfection?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's mainly because once you get an enemy down or disabled in Dead Space, the only real move is to stomp on them repeatedly until they explode. Whereas, Leon's doing suplexes and spinning jump kicks and shit on the enemies in RE4, and Isaac just can't compare.
Yeah. I will say this, though, something that I did find satisfying. It didn't work so much in rooms with multiple enemies because they would often get up in front of me, but the punch with the gun.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I took out so many necromorphs without needing to use any ammo, just by punching them over and over and over again for about a minute. and it worked. I
don't think I ever got to the point where I was meleeing them that much. You do have a melee attack with your gun, but it is useful, because like I said, the enemies, they get it right up in your face. So if you're not able to shoot out the legs before they get to you, you can hit them with a melee to back them up a little bit so that you can buy yourself some more space. So it is useful for that, for sure. We already mentioned the other half of this loop is when the enemies are down, you can either precisely line up headshots or save your ammo and do these brutal foot stomps. The foot stomps are cool. They're visceral. Isaac screams and curses when he's doing them, especially as the game goes on, it gets more and more gruff. By the end, he's had it with the stomping. I had a hard time predicting how many stomps it would take to kill a particular enemy. So sometimes I'd shoot them down, they'd be down on the ground. 1 stomp would take them out. Sometimes 2. Sometimes it would be 5 though, and I really couldn't predict it. And I took a lot of seemingly unnecessary damage because of that. Did that happen to you at all?
Occasionally. I think most of the time I did generally take them out with either the the melee punching with the gun or just shooting them enough times to where they were no longer moving. And then I, do the typical 1 stomp to get the whatever the delicious reward was from that monster. But yeah, there were definitely some panic stomps while they were up and attacking me. And yeah, that generally took a while, but I don't know. Me personally, I loved the stomp mechanic. It was very gorily satisfying, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's explosions of blood and viscera and shit when you're stomping. Isaac's yelling at him. It is good, especially when it, works the way I feel like it should. Like there are just a couple too many times where it was like, man, how many stomps is this thing going to take? I think one other funny thing is if you kill an enemy without stomping them, you can still run over and stomp on their corpse to get like an ammo drop or something like that. So there was like a real psychopath gamer behavior of mine where maybe I would see a dead body that I didn't stomp on. Maybe it was already there. Maybe it was like a dead crewman's body or something. And I'd run over and stomp on it. Like, please give me some more plasma cutter ammo. I'm out.
Oh, absolutely. I did the exact same thing. I was punching, I was stomping. In fact, I had one good moment that I loved that I was able to capture footage of where, so like there would be when you get to the medical unit, there's like a lot of like dead people strapped into like medical beds, and you'd punch them and they wouldn't really move or break up into chunky bits or anything. But I had one that was in some straps that I did one punch and he like flew across the room in like these gory bits. And it was just like, whoa, that is my favorite moment of this game, period.
They need some stronger duct tape to hold that body together, I guess.
Seriously.
We kind of talked before about how like this combat system, and I think it's a good basis for a combat system. I think it's really good. But I do think that it gets old about halfway or 2/3 of the way through the game. It was never like, not saying it was not fun to do all this stuff, but the encounters became incredibly predictable and it really felt like they ran out of ideas. So the reason that this didn't downgrade to just being like, I'm sick of this, is because there's not enough ammo for the guns that you want to use. So I do think that it's programmed in that, like, if you're favoring the plasma cutter, it will stop giving you plasma cutter ammo for a while to force you to use the other guns in your arsenal. And this is the thing that I think saved the combat from becoming like gratingly boring. Because if I could just use the plasma cutter the whole game, I would have, because it's so cool. It's one of my favorite video game weapons now. It's like gravity gun levels of awesome, I think. But they do make you mix it up. So the other weapons, luckily, I think are really fun, like pretty much across the board. Interesting, different use cases for different weapons. They will force you to get familiar with weapons that you're not familiar with. So I think that this, again, it's cool how they force you to mix it up, and it really saves the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that was generally a pretty good idea. I agree with that, absolutely. Like, most games, most of us, we end up favoring, one or two weapons at most to play through the entire game, and making me literally being so low on ammo that I've had to use every gun and then sometimes just punching people. Was a really good idea to get that that variety throughout the whole game with the weapons.
And there is like another layer of strategy that I kind of like intuited but didn't fully understand until I watched a couple of videos after I was done, and that's that in the remake there's this mechanic with the enemies where their skin will peel off as you shoot them. You'll see this with the plasma cutter. You'll shoot a necromorph in the leg and you'll see the skin fly off, and then you can shoot the exposed bone or something, I don't know, and you'll cut the leg easier. But different weapons have different properties as far as that goes. Some weapons are really great for peeling skin, and some weapons are really good for cutting, but you can't cut until you've peeled. So that's why it takes a couple of plasma cutter shots to like peel, and then it cuts. And there's a couple other weapons that don't do a whole lot of damage, but they're really great at peeling. And so if I understood this, I could have like been more efficient with my ammo, where it's like there's a shotgun analog gun in this game called the Force Gun. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but what it will do is it will peel all the skin off in one shot, and it will push them back, which is super helpful. And then one shot with the plasma cutter instead of 3 or 4 will cut the limb, and then you can go from there. I wish I understood this when I was playing. The game doesn't explain it to you, but it is shown visually, I guess. If you're paying attention to the enemies, you'll be like, holy shit, that dude's got no more skin. Would have been nice to know. But I think that there is a little bit of like mechanical complexity there where you could get really, really creative. It would be super useful on hard difficulties.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's actually something I don't think I really noticed on my playthrough.
Yeah, me
definitely,
either.
We'll keep that in mind for any future replays. That is very interesting.
Did you have a favorite of the other weapons that you get?
So I actually, aside from the plasma cutter, I agree with you on that one. That gun is very cool. But I think my favorite is actually the Ripper.
Oh yeah.
Just throwing that saw blade out and being able to basically stun lock the enemies until they're dead was very satisfying. And then, there was that one gun, I forget what it's called. Like it has like the reticule is like kind of like, I think it's like the longest line, which was perfect when you had it horizontal for getting rid of the tentacles.
Oh, the line gun. It's like a plasma cutter, but bigger, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the line gun.
That was perfect in those situations, especially when you got those, that dude in the wall who would spit out freaking tentacle guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, probably the Ripper.
Yeah. It's interesting that I think the one traditional weapon that you get in this game, you pick up a carbine. It's by far the worst gun, in my opinion. All of your engineering tools, like the plasma cutter, the Ripper, like you said, the Force Gun, which just does these kinetic blasts, those are all, in my opinion, much, much better. I have heard a lot of people say that they hate the flamethrower in Dead Space, and I do not understand. I loved the flamethrower.
Oh, the flamethrower was absolutely essential against those little raw chickens.
Yep, because they swarm you, and they're all over the place. So just a sweep with the flamethrower takes them out.
Absolutely.
All of your weapons have alt fires as well. By pressing, I forget the button, I should have written it down. It's probably R1 to use an alt fire. The plasma cutter's alt fire just rotates like what alignment the 3 plasma beams are, but the other guns all have special things. So the Ripper will shoot the saw blade out instead of just holding it out in front and kind of stun locking enemies. It will shoot them out, which is helpful again for those little tentacle baby assholes. Those are babies, by the way. I don't know if you noticed. Those are babies with tentacles.
Worst babies ever.
Yeah, they suck. They're the worst. Let's see, the flamethrower will just shoot a bomb, basically, which is real helpful for those assholes that are stuck in the walls that you just talked about there. The line gun will set up like pylons that will hurt enemies if they run through it. I never did that because I was always kind of in panic mode in combat. I didn't have the foresight to set up traps ahead of time.
I actually used that against those tentacle guys in the wall.
Nice.
And when they would shoot out their tentacles, they would just hit it and then eventually die, so I didn't have to really do anything. It was really nice.
Work smarter, not harder. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, as is the case in RE4, as we've praised so much, I do want to give Dead Space its props for having a ton of weapons that are all viable. I said the carbine kind of sucks, but I used it a lot because a lot of times that was what I had ammo for. So you're kind of forced to use everything. I don't know if it works like how you only pick up ammo for the weapons you have with you, or if you can still pick up, because you have like a storage box. I wonder if you leave a gun in the storage box, if you'll still pick up ammo for it. But I wanted to try everything, so I took everything with me.
Yeah, same. I'm really not sure how the item drops work. Like I know there were moments where I had to reload a bunch of times because I kept dying to something, and I would see like the same item drops, and they would seemingly be randomized. Like sometimes it would be, oh, here's some health, here's an ammo for this, here's an ammo for that, here's some money. Like it didn't seem very consistent.
Yeah, I think that it is dynamic based on how much ammo for each weapon you have, how much health you have, basically what situation are you in, and it will give you something to mix things up. So I think it's an elegant way to force you to use all your weapons. I never totally ran out of ammo in like a way that prevented me from proceeding through the game or making progress, but there were a lot of hairy situations where it was like, I'm out of ammo for 3 of the 4 guns I have. The last one, I have like 10 shots left. Let's make this work. Luckily, you have a couple of powers that you can use. One of them being kinesis, which lets you pick up stuff and throw them. And a lot of the arenas are littered with explosive canisters, like fire extinguishers or something like that, pipes, etc., that you can pick up and throw and do damage that way. So like even if you totally run out of ammo, you can still use that stuff.
Yeah, a very cool idea, but a mechanic that I actually never really used, if I can admit that. Just being in my typical panic mode, where I need to just throw off a million shots from whatever gun. I don't know. Like my brain doesn't work with, okay, I gotta press this button, hold that down, click this, and all that kind of stuff. So I never really used it outside of combat, or in combat rather.
Yeah, I think this is the pro move to use this stuff, because those explosive canisters are really powerful. You can take out an entire group of enemies with them. If you pick up a pipe and pin a necromorph against the wall, it's a one-hit kill. I just always forgot to do it.
Yeah.
And I would literally be sometimes tiptoeing around the explosive things because I know they explode. I don't want to be around them in the crossfire and die because one of them blows up. But it was really hard for me to make that mental connection for a lot of the game. Hey, idiot, pick that up and throw it. It will make your life a lot easier. It wasn't until the last third of the game where I was consistently okay, pick up and throw the explosive thing. Save your ammo, Dave,
Yeah, exactly. Any future replay, I'll have to be sure to do more of that.
Yeah. The other thing to be sure to do, if you didn't already, is to use your other power, which is called stasis, which you shoot out like a ball, and whatever it hits, it will create a slow time field around that. So if you hit an enemy, it will slow down that enemy, and any other enemy that runs up close will also get slowed down. This was another thing that they give it to you within the first hour or two of the game, and then for 3 or 4 more hours, I never used it until I suddenly was oh, this is actually incredibly powerful. And then it became a regular part of my my combat. How about, did you use this?
Similar to kinesis, not really. I think most of the time it was on those really fast doors that were opening and closing.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, just in combat, I just was not thinking about it. Mostly just thinking about using, the weapons or punching them,
It is tough to kind of train yourself to use a new tool that you maybe didn't expect to use or you're just not used to.
Yeah, exactly. I know I hit a couple of enemies throughout the game with there were those little stasis canisters or whatever that are sometimes littered about, which then was oh wait, yeah, that's right, I have stasis. And then 10 minutes later, I'd just forget about it.
Mm-hmm. That was me with kinesis. I did make it a point to use stasis a lot, especially later in the game. You have a big group of enemies together. You can just hit them with stasis. It'll freeze them for 5 seconds or something, and then you can you can kill some of them, or you can run to the other side of the room to buy yourself some time. It became very, very helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's nice that they for a game that still even gets a little tired 13 hours in with the combat loop. It is nice that there are options like that, using kinesis or stasis, ignoring them and using weapons, punching, and you can get, through really using, any of it.
Yeah. It is cool that you can get through pretty much any of the regular encounters with no ammo. If you use stasis, if you use kinesis to throw stuff, if you're meleeing, if you're stomping, I do think that a lot of the game is really doable without shooting the guns very often. But you want to shoot the plasma cutter. That shit's fun.
Hell yeah.
What did you think of the boss fights?
Oh boy. I am generally not a fan of boss fights in general. There's very few that I actually legitimately like, which I know is crazy for a lot of people, and especially in our post, Dark Souls world where it's all about those gigantic bosses, but they were fine, I guess. For example, my rare favorite boss fight in a video game is probably the various Jack Baker ones from RE7. But that's mostly just because I like that dude. They give him an interesting personality, but these are serviceable, I guess, for me.
Yeah, I don't think the boss fights are very good. You said that the main combat loop of shooting off limbs and stomping is video gamey. Well, the bosses are super video gamey. They're often there's one recurring boss that's like this eldritch alien terror, something that's way too big it feels like it's way too big to be damaged by anything that you could possibly use. The couple of boss fights that you do with it are in 0G, which is fine. It's not fun. I heard it's way better than the original, the 0G stuff. But yeah, the bosses all feel super formulaic. This thing there's 3 stations you have to go to where you can line up the orbital lasers and shoot it. And once you shoot it, it'll break the computer. And then you go to the next station and you do the same thing. And then you go to the 3rd station and do the same thing. And then you beat it. Or there's a boss where it's you can't hurt this thing. You have to lure it into a room and freeze it. And that's it. And it's just super video gamey. I don't think that they're that good. Yeah, I just don't think they're that good. They were more frustrating than fun and felt very video game boss fight by the numbers. The spectacle's cool. I will say the one I talked about that's a giant fucking alien, amorphous thing. The spectacle's cool. It's real big.
Yeah, I think once again, going back to Resident Evil, I think they kind of do the spectacle boss fight a little better, where the boss fight is just extremely easy. They're just gigantic. And, the old lady at the end of RE7 or Heisenberg from Village, you just blast them a few times. They're gigantic, but they go down easy. So you get the spectacle. It's no big deal, and it's done really quick.
Yeah, my frame of reference for Resident Evil is really limited, but RE4 lets you skip boss fights by using the rocket launcher if you want to, and Dead Space is no, you're going to go through these 3 phases. We learned how to make boss fights from Mario and Zelda. That's kind of how it feels. And it's cool spectacle, but I did not enjoy really any of them from a gameplay perspective. So the boss fights were the low point of the gameplay for me personally.
Yeah, I'd say probably about the same. That always just became kind of a loop of, all right, I'm going to die, I don't know, a few times. I'm going to run around. Wait, how am I supposed to do this? And then eventually figure it out, whatever the trick is. Not very good.
Yeah. One last thing about gameplay that I want to give props for. We said resources and ammo are really scarce, and this game really activates my gamer gremlin brain of going through all these spaces, opening all the containers, looting everything I can see for every last resource I can find. It's intensely satisfying. And in this game, a lot of the containers are on the ground, and so the most efficient way to open them is to stomp the fuck out of them, which is cool.
Oh, absolutely. Being a big fan of the stomp mechanic, period, man. Stomping corpses, stomping boxes. It was pretty perfect. And also, a lot of the containers and lockers you can't get into when you first see them. So you get to backtrack when you get like higher clearance levels and all of that. Mm-hmm. Get some more, goodies for the future. Really, really nice.
Yeah, agreed. There is some degree of backtracking that the main story makes you do, but often like you'll go through some Dead Space shit and then you'll find yourself in a new area of a level you've already been in, and it's like, okay, to go to the next chapter you have to go to the tram station, but next to the tram station is these hallways and rooms that were either locked before or there's locked containers in there, and so you can go back and kind of clean up some of that stuff, and that always feels great.
Yeah, and I figure that like if you're dedicated to like doing like the side quests, the very few that I did towards the beginning had a lot of backtracking as well.
Yeah.
So you got like another reason to go back, and then you can check out the new access to goodies.
Yeah. Engage that gamer brain.
That's right.
So before we get into spoilers, we will finish up the non-spoiler part by just giving some brief wrap-up thoughts and answering the question, who would you recommend Dead Space to? So Chris, who would you recommend Dead Space to?
All right. If you like B-horror movies, you like aliens, you like Event Horizon, you like stomping on people, you like gore, you like jump scares, this one is right up your alley. I'd say probably the most obvious is fans of the original. I'd say this is definitely an improvement over the original. And and anybody who played it back in the day, it's worth going back to. Especially with the added things, side quests. While I didn't do very much of that myself, I think some of those are pretty cool. You get more context for different characters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You like action horror? Right up your alley.
Yeah. I think I would, first of all, just recommend this game to fans of third-person shooters, especially if you are fond of Resident Evil 4 or the RE2 or 3 remakes from what I've seen from those. I do think that this combat system of cutting off limbs and stomping and stuff like that is fun enough to like give a recommendation to try Dead Space just based on that, because you'll probably think the story is at the very least interesting to follow along, even if, as I'm going to talk about in the spoiler section, some of the story falls a little bit flat, but a lot of it is pretty interesting to follow. But I do think that the combat is really, really good until that point where I said that it kind of got old. But like the first section of the game where before that point, it was really fun, like consistently. It's challenging. It's always making you mix up your weapons and approach things with different strategies. So there's a recommendation just based on that. I have not heard anybody who played the original Dead Space say that the remake is worse. It was a pretty consistent opinion. Like when I was, because I when Dead Space won the Patreon poll, I was like, oh, well, I can play the original. It's on Game Pass. So should I play the original or should I play the remake? And it was a pretty unanimous, like, no, just play the remake. It's better. So fans of the original, if you liked it, try out the remake. you can trust all of those other people. Chris, you would agree with that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No reason to go back to the original. maybe watch some video footage online, but yeah, the remake is definitely an improvement.
Yeah. I would say like you could go back to the original if you're one of those people that like places value in playing the original thing and seeing the original thing. But for me, I'm probably only going to play Dead Space one time, so I wanted to just play the better version, which sounds like the remake is. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the people I would recommend Dead Space. Fans of horror games, of course. This is a really famous horror game. If you haven't played it, give it a shot. Yeah, I came out of it thinking that this game is pretty good. It does a lot of things well, and it just kind of overstays its welcome in more ways than one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Which is really easy to do. I mean, I've always thought like horror games, 4 to 8 hours max is the perfect sweet spot. You kind of go past that 8 hours, and things start to get old. And a game like Dead Space, definitely being longer, kind of hinders it a bit.
Yeah. I think we talked about this on last week's episode about Iron Lung, which is an hour long, so it has no opportunity to overstay its welcome. We talked about that on that episode, how horror is a mood that is it's really hard to sustain for longer than 10 hours or so. By a certain point, people are just going to get used to what you're doing. So I think nothing really quite beats the first couple hours in a horror game when you're not fully aware of how everything works yet. And anything could happen, which is, how Dead Space was too. I actually streamed the first couple hours of this game. So I think that also played into this game not scaring me, because when it was introducing all of its newest fresh ideas at me, I was talking with people in the chat. I was describing what's going on the screen as people do when you stream. And I think that took a lot of the edge away. And then it just didn't have anything new for me after those first couple hours as far as like ways to scare me or anything. So a little bit unfortunate, but hey, that's Hollywood. So
yeah, that's right. And yeah, streaming, definitely makes things, scary games a lot less scary.
Yeah. Speaking of streaming, if they want to find you, Chris, and your Twitch channel, can you talk about your Twitch channel? Talk about what you stream and where people can find you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I am a Vertigo2Hell on Twitch. The word 2 is just the number 2. And basically I stream a lot of horror games, like a lot of indie horror games. And then I also stream weirdo games, games that I don't think a lot of people generally stream. Like for example, I've recently done Road Warden. Still got to go back to that. The weird indie RPG. I've done a lot of like weirdo FMV games, including a little remembered one from Capcom in the 90s that was a comedy spy thriller that was not very funny. But generally horror and weirdo games. But the Vertigo2Hell on Twitch. I also have VOD uploads and YouTube shorts of that stuff on YouTube under the exact same screen name.
Awesome. Yeah. So anyone who's interested in watching Chris stream can go check out Vertigo2Hell on Twitch. I don't watch streams often, but I do pop into Chris's streams from time to time to hang out. They're a good time. I like your streaming setup. I've never seen anyone else have their game on the TV behind them, which is cool. I love it. More people should do it. It's a cool little visual look, and the black and white filter and everything. It's a good time. And, good, friendly people in the chat. I enjoy hanging out with you when you do it. So I'll give the recommendation for everyone who's looking for, especially indie and weird horror game streams, to check out Vertigo2Hell on Twitch. And you'll find a link down in the show notes where you can easily go and hit that follow button.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. for Tales from the Backlog, if people want to support this show, if you've enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you just help me spread the word. That is the best way to help a young indie podcast spread its wings, is to spread the word, tell people about it, share it in your online spaces. You can also leave a rating and review if you listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podcast Addict. That is really helpful as well. If you write a review on Apple Podcasts or Podcast Addict where I can see who you are, I will dedicate the next treat I give to my dog to you. So there you go. You can also join the Discord server for this podcast and my other podcast, which is called A Top 3 Podcast. We have a awesome Discord community full of people who want to talk video games, talk about movies, all kinds of other stuff. We would love to have you come join the community. There's an invite link down in the show notes. And finally, if you would like to support monetarily, you can do so at patreon.com/realdavejackson, where you can vote in polls for games to appear on the show, just like Dead Space. Or at higher levels, you will get my bonus retro gaming show called Tales from the Way Backlog. The October game is Zombies Ate My Neighbors. So you can check out patreon.com/realdavejackson for all of that. With all of that being said, Chris and I are going to take a break. We're going to come back. After that point, it is full spoiler time for Dead Space. Okay, Chris and I are back, and it is full spoiler time for Dead Space. And when I say full spoilers, we are not going to go in chronological order, so we're going to spoil the entire fucking thing right now. So if you don't want to get out of, if you don't want that, you should leave right now. Okay. So you mentioned Event Horizon several times. As soon as we started seeing the logs and like text files about psychological symptoms for what's going on, I immediately jumped to Event Horizon. Now, I don't remember what the cause of that in Event Horizon was. Was it some alien artifact in that movie too?
Oh, it's literally hell.
Oh, hell.
Yeah, there's the spaceship has this gateway drive, which is used to like jump from one place in space to another. But when they activated it for the first time, it opened a portal to hell, and the ship went there and then came back haunted by hell.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a little bit cooler than what's going on in Dead Space, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's actually happened is they discovered an alien artifact called the Marker. It is like a monolith type thing that they found. And being near the Marker causes all of these psychological symptoms and then causes people to transform into necromorphs after repeated exposure or getting like really, really close to it. The Marker was found on this planet that they were going to excavate. And there are like multiple conspiracies surrounding the Marker as you learn about why it's there and who knows that it's there and who knew it was there the whole time. So what did you think about this storyline of like, this is the explanation for why there are aliens, basically?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. I know for me, I could never ever get over just kind of like the generic sounding Marker. Mm-hmm. It was, I don't know, always something I couldn't really take that seriously. But yeah, like, I don't know. I think it does fit in with the kind of like B horror movie kind of deal. You got some weird monolith object. It's creating aliens or necromorphs. You know, you got the weird cult church mixed up with that whole deal.
Yeah, the unitologists that are you read a little bit about the unitologists, and it is just Scientology in space, basically. the structure of how they describe how it works, how you pay money to advance within the church, and the belief that, they believe that they will ascend to a higher form of living, which is being the necromorphs. It's like one-to-one Scientology.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like for me personally, I didn't really find the Church of Unitology that scary or creepy to me. For me, I just kept being reminded of the Hubologists from Fallout 2, which was a earlier also spoof on Scientology, more comedy based, but I don't know, doing kind of like a horror Scientology. I don't know. I think real life science that whole deal is a lot scarier than the any fictional version.
Yeah. I would tend to agree. The one thing I will give it though, in here is that the Scientologists, and there's the ship is like full of Unitologists, and it seems like more widespread than Scientology is in our real world. Like the ship is full of them. Isaac's parents were Unitologists. The one thing that I think is really cool is that the Unitologists thought that the U.S. government was trying to hide the marker. Because they found it on the planet they were mining. They brought it up to the ship. They thought there was this big conspiracy about that the U.S. or the Earth government, that they call it, is involved in trying to cover up this whole thing. That's part one of their conspiracy, but they were right about that. The Earth government was trying to cover up this whole thing. That's why Isaac and Kendra and the rest of the Kellyan were there to try and cover this up.
Yeah, that is true. Kind of reminds me a lot. Not even talking about our Event Horizon this time, but Alien or Aliens with Weyland Yutani, that corporation, doing their own cover-ups, secret conspiracies, trying to get their own, the alien for themselves for whatever, they wanted to do with it, all that kind of stuff.
I haven't seen Alien in such a long time that, I don't remember. But the reason I think that this is cool is because, like, once you read just the slightest bit about Unitology in here, you're going to be like, oh, that's Scientology. They're full of shit, because Scientology is full of shit. But then they present this thing where they're like, we believe the government is hiding this from us. And they're right about that. You just dismiss it out of hand, because why would they be right about anything? They're Scientology.
Yeah, that is true. That is a cool little twist on it.
The thing that they were wrong about, though, is the whole death and rebirth in a higher plane of being, or whatever the fuck they call it in Dead Space. What they are is they're turning into aliens, and there's no happy ending after that. So they had me a little bit in the first half, but they were the most wrong about the most important thing. So,
Yeah. I would totally completely pass on getting turned into a necromorph.
Yeah, hard pass for sure. Although you still get to keep your clothes. Some of the necromorphs were funny that they still got to wear like their shin guards so that you can't shoot their legs out.
See, there's always a silver lining.
Yeah. But they eventually explain what I think is cool. Another kind of like fun twist on this story is that this marker that's on the planet was not originally there. It was originally on Earth. They brought it to this planet to take it off of Earth and hide it. And then the Ishimura found it. And now the Earth government, led by Kendra, she's not the leader. She's just the representative of the Earth government on the Kellyan with you. She's been kind of helping you along your quest the whole game, but her real purpose is to get this marker under control and hide it and cover it all up again, which is just classic Earth government.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I know I found myself personally, getting into the red herring of the other dude that you're working with, being like, oh, I'm not trusting this guy. This guy is up to some conspiracy stuff. But yeah, then it ends up being, Kendra, really.
It was kind of, I'm going to do one of those guy who's only seen the Boss Baby, comparing everything else to the Boss Baby things here, but it reminds me of Barry versus Wesker in Resident Evil, the first one, where if you play as Jill, they set up Barry as the one you can't trust when it's actually Wesker the whole time. Kind of similar here, where Kendra seems really helpful, but the other guy, it's one of those things where he's like, yeah, Isaac, everything's fucked. I need you to go repair the gravity field. I'm going to hang out in the comms tower. I'm just going to be chilling in this office while you go do all this stuff. Yeah. Could you go fix the satellites? That'd be great.
Yeah. Just an entire game of, yeah, Isaac, we're going to need you to do this and risk your life over and over and over again for 13 hours.
Actually, I made a mistake. I misspoke. The marker on the Ishimura is a duplicate of the real marker that was on the Earth. So, again, the unitologists were right about that. The Earth government's covering it up. This was an experiment to make a new marker and see how it goes, basically. So we see how it goes, and Kendra's there to do the cleanup, I suppose. Oh,
yeah. Kind of forgot. Yeah, the whole duplicate thing.
Yeah.
All of that is just pretty wild.
Yeah. It's kind of fun following the story of the marker and what's actually going on. I mean, an alien artifact that causes people to go crazy and turn into aliens is fun. I like that. It's just a fun little concept.
Yeah, it's always a good time, and then you get to stomp on them.
Yeah,
which is even a better time.
Yeah. I will say the last level, when you leave the Ishimura to like take the marker back down to the surface of the planet, that last level sucks. It is an entire level, an entire hour and a half of the marker's on a conveyor belt. Oh no, there's a bridge blocking it. Go raise the bridge and fight a bunch of dudes. And then it moves to the next room. Oh no, the marker's stuck on something else. Please get rid of that and fight a bunch of dudes for like an hour. And it's, it sucks.
Yep, agreed there. Not a big fan of that at all.
It was cool to get off the ship. It was cool to see something other than the inside of the ship. But what you're doing was so clearly out of ideas that I didn't like it.
Yeah, I would have taken a couple more zero-G segments outside of the ship than that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
For sure. Oh, there's another thing that I heard was really shitty in the original that got fixed was the zero-G segment where you're doing like the asteroid defense.
Yeah. That is definitely improved. I don't like it's been so long I don't remember a ton of details from the original segment of that, but I think just in general, like the zero-G segments were pretty improved. You know, they're not perfect or anything, but it's always kind of fun floating around, you know, setting that jetpack or whatever, the boots off. Reminded me a lot of some of those segments from Prey, actually.
Yeah, I think they're better in Dead Space than they were in Prey. Like, fighting in zero-G in Prey was terrible, I thought.
Yeah.
It also gave me motion sickness, so that doesn't help. But in Dead Space, they were fine. I didn't like the boss fights that were in zero-G, but the regular fighting was kind of fun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you get a couple necromorphs, a couple tentacle dudes, and you can just, you know, kind of zip on by, really loop around them in zero-G. I thought those are pretty fun.
Yeah. So the other thing, probably the more famous part of the story in Dead Space, is that you're on the hunt to find Nicole, who is Isaac's girlfriend, wife, partner, whatever. And Nicole has been dead the entire time. And that is a revelation. There's a big scene at the end where Kendra tells you about what's been going on. First, though, all the chapters have names, and there's like a little Easter egg, I guess, that the chapter names, the first letter in every name of the chapters spell out Nicole is dead. So did you notice this when you were playing?
I did not.
Yeah.
This is actually all new to me. I never had this spoiled. And yeah, just seeing it here is pretty wild and kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know how anyone would notice that unless they write down all the chapter names or they look at a guide and then they spend too long looking at the list of chapter names. Like,
yeah,
it's to the point where, like, I don't think anyone's going to figure this out on their own. If you did, if you're listening and you did, that's cool. You are much more observant than the two of us. But in my opinion, it's to the point where, like, it wouldn't be a cool reveal to figure that out. It's just something where everyone's going to see it after the fact and be like, huh, that's kind of interesting. But that's all that adds up to, in my opinion. But anyway, Nicole's been dead the whole time. So we said at the beginning, Isaac gets a distress call from Nicole. This is the thing that I said is just kind of dumb. I think the way that they explained this. So as you've been going through the game, you see all these, what you now know are hallucinations. You've been talking with Nicole. Nicole's been with you. She rode in the spaceship down to the surface of the planet with you. But like, she doesn't act like a normal person. She teleports from place to place. She kind of leads you along, and she doesn't run up and give you a hug when she sees you. Like it's your romantic partner or something. Like she acts super detached and all of that. And it turns out it's because she's not real. And the reason for this that they gave is that there's an extra minute on the video and Isaac just didn't watch it. So like the first half is the distress call and then the second half is Nicole killing herself. But Isaac just stopped it after the distress call part. And that is an explanation that I'm just like, I don't buy that for 1 second at all.
No, absolutely not. Like who is not watching the whole video?
Yeah,
like
from their wife or their girlfriend or whatever. Like,
yeah,
you think I'm not going to watch I'm just going to stop after like the part where she's like, we're in danger. And then I'm like, yeah, I don't need any more information. I see there's another minute here, but I've seen what I need to see, you know?
Yeah. At least like in the beginning of like Resident Evil 7, when Mia sends Ethan that little footage, you know, the hey baby, bye baby, kind of, oh I love you kind of thing, and then there's like a second one, but that one doesn't get sent. Like it's stopped by Lucas or whoever. Where you know she's like stay away. That's a better explanation than I'm done with you, Nicole.
Again, I've seen what I need to see. I don't need to watch this entire video. Like this was spoiled for me beforehand. I did it to myself. I listened to Play Along podcast and their episode about it. So I knew that she was dead, but I was doing yard work or something. I wasn't like paying attention to how you find out that she's dead. And I just like, I think the storyline of Isaac hallucinating and all of that is cool. And you get like really cool visual glitching and the sounds of the whispers and people like whispering to Isaac and saying stuff. That's all awesome. But then the explanation being that Isaac just willfully didn't watch the whole video is really fucking stupid, I think.
Yeah, it's so stupid. But it also, the whole Nicole thing actually, again, reminds me of Event Horizon.
Okay.
I hate to do it again, but there's a scene where there's a character. She's back on Earth. She's like a mother, and and all that. She has like a kid who's sort of kind of like injured, and then all of a sudden, she thinks her kid is on the ship somehow, because hell is haunting the ship. But she really starts to believe this kid is on the ship and is chasing him around until she ends up falling and injuring herself really bad. Like, no. Your kid did not fly up to space to get on the spaceship. Like, yeah, Nicole isn't really there, dude.
Yep. This is revealed in like a big dramatic conversation with Kendra at the end after you fight the final. No, it's before you fight the final boss. I think so. No, it's after because it's
after.
right. It's after because it's right before you escape.
Right.
She has this big conversation explaining what's going on. But like anyone who's paying it, like, did this surprise you the first time when you played the original, the knowledge that she's dead?
Oh, I'd say probably. But I was also a lot younger back in 2008.
That's
not as knowledgeable on the horror stuff and tropes and stupid tricks.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say, I think that this was laid out pretty well, like pretty obviously. I guess if you're not looking for it, then maybe, but the fact that, you know, when you're leaving the planet, Nicole literally teleports from the room where you were to inside the spaceship. You turn your head, she's not there, and when you turn back, she's sitting next to you. And so that should be a little hint. And the way she acts and all of the other obvious hallucinations should kind of clue you in, I think, a little. But you're right. In 2008, I was a lot less media savvy than I am right now. And also, as I've noted on the show many times, a twist will normally catch me by surprise because I'm normally not putting those puzzle pieces together. I guess I just had the benefit of already knowing in order to see the foreshadowing this time.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, especially when I'm watching movies, it also happens with games. Like I end up getting into this mode where I try to be more focused, but I end up missing so much because I'm trying to be focused on something, and then all this other stuff, you know, and like people think I'm crazy for it, but like it's kind of like why I gotta watch movies multiple times to really fully get it.
Yeah, I think that like doing games for the podcast helps me with that because I'm always taking notes. So like those details that maybe seemed weird, I'm more likely to write them down now than like if I'm playing something that's not for the podcast or, you know, 5 years ago, I would play something and maybe I wouldn't note down that, hey, why doesn't Nicole give Isaac a hug? Maybe I wouldn't make note of that. So, but yeah, it's a weird twist that I think works in some ways, but like the biggest reveal is really dumb, I think. The other part of that though is that there's another doctor on this ship that you've been talking with, and the marker has been forcing her to think that Isaac is her dead boyfriend, who was on the ship as well, which I think that's cool. Like, hey, this is happening to other people. Like the exact same thing is happening to other people. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually a couple of interesting doctors on that ship. I know there was that one dude doctor who was like all about unitology and I can't remember if it was actually in one of the side quests where I eventually got like one of those holograms of the like he was like experimenting on people working on the Ishimura, and I know there was that one dude at least that I don't know if it was his first time making a necromorph or what.
The one who made the regenerating one?
Oh, yeah, exactly. The regenerator guy, yeah.
Yeah. It seems like maybe not all the doctors. I bet the Ishimura had more than 3 doctors, but at least those 3 were up to some nonsense on their ship.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of the final boss fight? There is this giant alien on the surface of the planet that is, it's like a hive mind, I think. It's controlling all the necromorphs, and so you're returning the marker to the planet, but you also want to stop the necromorphs. So, did you enjoy that fight?
More or less. Again, I think the spectacle is cool.
Yeah.
But the actual fight, I can, take or leave, really.
Yeah.
But, you're doing an action horror game, make that shit big,
Yep.
It's very cool looking.
It is big, and the boss fight basically amounts to it slams its tentacles down and you just run to the side to avoid it, and it spits out poison and you just run to the other side to avoid it, and it'll spawn some ads and you kill them. The cool thing is after you beat it, it will pick you up and hold you upside down. So you have an upside down kind of action sequence where you have to shoot the eye. You get unlimited ammo for this section. It is possible to fail, which kind of sucks. Kind of wish it wasn't possible to fail that. But anyway, that was kind of cool. That's the final boss.
Yeah. Would be cool if they could learn a little bit maybe from Resident Evil, even like a remake, like that final boss fight, not too difficult in my opinion. Salazar, and you're running across the little area, but I don't know, that is still better to me.
Well, they had the courage in that game to have the final boss turn into this giant screen-filling enemy, and then you get a rocket launcher which kills it in one hit, and it's this big cinematic badass moment.
Yeah.
Whereas in Dead Space, you're just kind of dodging these tentacles and shooting the weak spots as they become uncovered. It's extremely Legend of Zelda,
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there are two endings. Which ending did you get?
Oh, I got the regular one.
Actually, yeah. Now that I think about it, the regular one's the only one you can get if you just play it once. Yeah. In this ending, you leave on the ship. Isaac kind of sits in silence on the ship. He's extremely fucked up by what he's seen and done, which is understandable.
Yep.
The distress call from Nicole plays again. He turns it off, but then he hears the line, "I wish I could just talk to someone," from the video. But this time it's not from the video recording. It's from inside the room. And he looks over and Nicole's dead body is in the seat next to him. And then this jump scare got me. The dead body lunges at you and it cuts to black right at the end.
Yeah. This, again, apologies. Again, this is a very Event Horizon ending.
One more for the road.
Yeah. Because that one, like it ends with like kind of like a jump scare like that where, oh, we're off the ship, we're traveling, away, and then big jump scare. Oh, you're not really off the ship. And then the lady wakes up and she's with like the whatever recovery crew, found them or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she's just all like she's kind of gone like insane in panic and all of that. Really reminds me of that.
Man, I wrote at the beginning that this movie or this game reminded me of Event Horizon. I didn't know it went that deep throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy, and there's no aliens in Event Horizon, so
Well, there we go. We've got one half, like you said in the elevator pitch, one half Alien and one half Event Horizon.
That's right. Perfect.
Have you watched the other ending before?
I have not.
Okay. I will describe it to you. And for anyone else listening, there is another ending that you can get if you play New Game Plus. And then there are these items called marker fragments that are situated around the station. You go collect all of them and then put them in like the captain's office. There's like a table with like a diorama set up or something. And you place all of them and then you can get this alternate ending where it starts out the same, except Nicole is alive and walking around in the spaceship with Isaac as they escape. And they're talking to each other. They're talking about where they're going to go and what they're going to do. Isaac has this very creepy, like, grin on his face. Like, he doesn't look disheveled like he does in the regular ending. He looks deranged now. He's got this weird smile and shit. Him and Nicole are talking, and he basically says, before we do anything else, I have to build a little something first, but I think you're going to like it, he says to her. And then she was in the background and she walks forward up to the pilot seat and she's still very much dead from what you can see of her face. So I think this means Isaac is going to build another marker. I think since you left the other one on the planet.
Oh, that is interesting. I kind of dig that for like a dark horror kind of ending.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it more than the regular ending, which I guess makes sense if they want people to work harder to get this ending.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the original ending fits, but this is cooler, I think, because it leaves me with a lot more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of dig that idea. Like, it reminds me of the horror game Visage, where you can, you can go through the game, and then once you're done with all the chapters, you can end it, or you can collect all these pieces for this mask, and then you get the quote good ending. Even though I don't think any ending in that game is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is kind of a very fun for like a replay. And Crazy Isaac, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you should look up the ending on YouTube. It's, these endings are like a minute long, so you should look it up on YouTube and see his face. It's kind of cool how he's just completely lost it, but in a like happy and content way now, instead of mentally broken like the original ending. And you said you never played Dead Space 2, but I did watch some videos that kind of said that this alternate ending connects a little bit better with Dead Space 2 than the original one.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't know if what I know about Dead Space 2 is like a late game spoiler that they reveal about what's going on there, but this does connect a little bit better.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty cool. And I do know this did, playing through Dead Space Remake did leave me curious about actually finally getting to Dead Space 2.
Yeah, yeah.
And, well, who knows about 3? I know that does not have its fans.
Right.
But, yeah.
From what I hear, I think if I remember right, they leaned more in an action direction and less of a horror direction. And also, like, you've already played 2 games of this. What else do they have for you? I'm curious if they're going to keep remaking these. Like, I imagine this game did pretty well, I think. So I imagine we'll get Dead Space 2 remake, which will be cool. I'll play that for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, now I'm kind of like, oh, do I wait a few years to play the Dead Space 2 remake, or do I play the original? And then I guess the real test comes if they get to Dead Space 3 remake. Are they going to be able to pull a Capcom and like improve whatever was bad about the original? Kind of like at least for me, Capcom improving like the military island, for example, in 4-make.
Oh yeah, for sure. Huge improvement there. But this remake of the first game was good enough that if they remake Dead Space 2, I'll definitely play it. And if they don't, I'll definitely consider playing the original Dead Space 2. I just, got a lot of games to play, and this one like I enjoyed it, but we talked about how it wore out its welcome, and it didn't leave me with a feeling of like I need to play Dead Space 2 immediately. It didn't leave me with that feeling.
Yeah. Same, more or less. Like, if it did leave me like that, I would have, gone right into Dead Space 2 and not, anything else. But yeah, I'd say this, for me is probably that like, classic, like a lot of indie horror is like this for me, where it's like a solid that C+, B-, kind of like just right in there, where it's enjoyable, for what it is.
Yeah. I think it's too long. I think they ran out of gameplay ideas well before they wrapped up the story, and the story was like half of a success and then half of kind of a wet fart at the end of the Nicola's dead storyline. So it was a little bit disappointing. I was expecting more from the story from that perspective, but yeah, what are you going to do?
That's right.
This has been a good time, man. I thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I will recommend again at the end of the show for everyone who's stuck it out to the end. Thank you very much. I recommend you all check out Vertigo2Hell, again, the number 2 on Twitch. Good horror game streams there, fun vibe, cool chat, good stuff. Again, check down in the show notes. You'll find a link to the Twitch channel where you can go and check out that everything Chris is doing there. So, Chris, thank you again. Good times. Thank you to everybody who listened to the end. You all are my heroes. And tune in next week for the final game of Horror Month, which is Signalis, coming up next week.